This episode of Planted is brought to you by Yorma's Choice.
The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara. I'm Sara, your host, and today we have the honor of having rock journalist Ben Fong-Torres on the show. Ben, welcome. I'm just really excited to sit down and talk with you today.
Sure, Sara. Hopefully, it'll be my pleasure.
I hope so, too. So, first question I always like to ask all my guests, what was your first cannabis experience?
I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Whenever that happens.
It was that time that I was with this congressperson who will deny this, of course, but no. It was probably in college. Sara, this is not a joke about potheads, but I don't remember. And the reason I don't is because back then, let's talk about 1964, 65. Yeah, oh, wow, 60 years ago would be my first experience. And it may have been with my roommates or a fellow staffer at the daily newspaper at San Francisco State, because there were parties for the staff once every few weeks, and the weed would come out and we would all partake. But maybe before then, as a reporter for the Daily Gator, or the Golden Gator, it was called that year, I believe I reported on various guest speakers on campus. We had a speaker's platform in the middle of the quad with a sound system, a redwood platform where people can book their time there or just wander up and exercise free speech. And I remember covering at least once a representative from Lamar. And I don't recall what I wrote, what he said, or how big a crowd there was, but they always drew a crowd. And so that was my first knowledge of marijuana and the beginning of the battle to legalize it. Although in later years, of course, I learned that the fight had gone back probably 30 years before that or more. So in doing some research for a project I'm involved in right now, I have traced Lamar back to the late 50s, and with Ed Sanders of the Fugs and Allen Ginsberg, the poet and activist. And so it went back, obviously, a few years before I saw the representative at the SF State. And I remember that it was kind of mysterious to me because certain things are illegal, and yet here is a proponent of that coming onto the campus and trying to get students to be aware of what was going on in terms of the battle for decriminalization, although they were obviously by their name seeking to legalize it. So that was my first knowledge of it. It's either a party with the Gator staff members or my roommates, but I think that came along later, or just simply reporting it for the campus paper.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were in this really pivotal time with culture in our country, whether we were talking about things around, substances or music. You captured a really impactful period of time in music then too. With the Lamar, I'm almost wondering if it was a dear friend of mine, Michael Aldrich, because he was part of Lamar. And he was also one of Allen Ginsberg's assistants. And when he got arrested, Ginsberg showed up as his spiritual and financial advisor in court.
Well, he was at least one of those. But yeah, for some reason, I'm thinking of the name Fred, but that may.
Oh, yeah.
Fred at Lamar? I don't know.
Yes. And for the life of me right now, I'm trying to remember because I believe that he still lives here too.
Wow. Well, just for you and for myself, I'm going to go and look through what they used to call string books in journalism department, where when you wrote a story for the paper, you would cut it out and accumulate your strings of, I guess, typed stories. So I think I have mine from my couple of years as a reporter for the Gator before becoming the editor. And so I'll try to find the Lamar article. And if I find Fred, I will, well, even if I don't, I'll let you know.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know, because there's, and for the life of me, I can't remember his last name. And this is horrible because I know listeners out there are probably screaming it as I'm saying this, but he still writes a magazine, and he lives in Alameda, and he's in his 80s. And I know that he's also an avid bicycle rider, but I can't remember his last name for the life of me. But
we must Google him.
We must Google him.
Fred Peter Lamar. And,
yeah.
We'll see. Okay.
We'll have to figure it out. But you covered, before we started recording, I was mentioning that there was an article in the 70s where you also talked about amorphia, and the same friends were involved with that. And I've noticed on eBay, because when they were setting that up, they were selling rolling papers to raise funds, and you can still find them on eBay.
The rolling papers?
The rolling papers.
That's incredible.
Isn't it?
Well, I hope they still hold up. Amorphia, I have no recollection of having written about them. The same thing applies to dozens, if not hundreds. Well, no, let's just say dozens. Let's be modest, Fong-Torres. Articles that I wrote that I just don't remember because of the flood of work that made up our workday at Rolling Stone, especially in the early years before our staff grew. All of us early editors were hyphenates. We edited, we wrote headlines, we acquired photographs, whatever, ran bureaus. We had certain beats. And so I was doing about 5 things at once, and sometimes a story about a dead bust, or amorphia, or Reverend Helmsley creating the church in Modesto. Whatever it is, you just crank that stuff out, and then a year or so later, you don't remember that you wrote that piece.
Oh yeah, you're going at such a pace. That's like I'm a writer, but I have a lot of friends who are writers and editors for magazines. And just the other week, a whole group of us got together during SF Weed Week, and I was talking to them, and I was like, so, when I write something, I put it away and then I go back to it, because I'm do articles from time to time, but these are like women who are like hashing out stuff all the time. They're like, oh no, that is not how we do it. You sit down, you write it, you get it out, Sara. And I was like, wow, to be at that kind of pace, and the pace that you must have been going, especially in those times.
Reporters, journalists from other magazines, if they were from the daily paper, for example, because we were friends with a lot of the folks in the business, would admire Rolling Stone for having to come out only once every 2 weeks, whereas they were meeting a daily deadline quite often. But the fact is that we were working just as much of a grind, because Jan was so anxious to see a new issue every couple of weeks that he kind of broke that rule. It's not a rule, but the tradition of national magazines is pretty much, unless you're Time and Newsweek and U.S. Business Report, it's once a month. After a few years of Rolling Stone, I felt what a luxury that would be to actually have almost a month between issues. But we did not have that. We were doing stuff every day. And if we weren't doing stuff, we were traveling to get stuff. So that's how hard it was.
Dude, what do you think as far as with publications nowadays? Because that's we see a lot of different things. Like now, High Times has had some hard times. We had a whole bunch of publications, especially when we were in the medicinal cannabis era. And now that we're going into legalization, you'd think that this would be where there'd be more articles, more things coming out. But it feels like the printed word magazines in some ways are collapsing. And I think, as somebody who's like an avid reader and writer and just finds the word sacred, I wonder, like, if we're just going through a phase now, or what the trajectory is.
Oh, it's not a phase. It's a changing of the world. through technology. And it's been going on for a long, long time. The demographics are such that younger people just simply do not have that interest that us old, me anyway, old folks remember, and that the boomers still adhere to. They still treasure the printed New York Times or New Yorker or High Times. But the fact is that almost all traditional, established, and especially in print media, magazines, and newspapers are dying. And it is not subject related. It's, Time magazine may be doomed. Who knows? Just the way life was 20 years ago. And now it's
Yeah.
all back to life. No pun intended. But the fact is, the audience just isn't there. And the same thing with radio that I covered for many years at the Chronicle was that the audience simply went away because they are now able to have alternative sources of music that are much more what they want, from college to satellite to internet radio. And so much of it is free and commercial free. And that's the thing that's driving kids away from traditional media, the advertising. Well, online, they can just pick out the story they want, look at it, print it out if they want to, or just throw it into their storage and come back to it later. It's just much more convenient to see television, movies, read magazines and newspapers that way. And so High Times is by no means alone. And it's too bad for us oldsters. But, what we have to do is also acclimate to the changing times. So I'm still getting all the news and opinion and entertainment I want. It's just from different sources.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think too, when we especially when we're looking at radio, because I know that you were a K-San DJ. I saw the documentary. My husband was in it too. And yeah, but it was really interesting to hear what you had to say about it, especially because you were there, you were doing a regular show, and how things changed from radio. Like when I was growing up, when whoever was, at the desk was playing what they wanted. And then now we're getting into all this formulaic stuff. Cause I can't tell you, every time I put on the radio, it's the same crap. And
Same crap.
Exactly. You think that killed it?
Sarah, that started 30 years ago.
Yeah.
As soon as FM freeform progressive rock, album rock proved to be a success, the corporations took over, bought up the stations, and then, of course, tried to get more of an audience by mainstreaming it slightly. And so they softened the sound, because it was coming around the same time as new wave and punk. And the corporations wouldn't go for that. So they basically snapped up the stations. Reagan didn't help too much by loosening the ownership laws so that corporations could have bunches of stations instead of just a handful allowed in previous years. And so, it was the mainstreaming of radio, and it began really as far back as the mid to late 70s. And it's gone on like that ever since. But now with technology and AI and all of that, radio is no longer really local the way it had been. The tremendous attraction of radio had been the fact that you could identify with that voice on the speaker saying that, she's, I saw her the other day at this dance or whatever it was, a station event or a holiday party. And now you're talking about robots and DJs who are doing syndicated shows, except they're not being paid for it, from one area somewhere in the country. And then it's sent out to 5 different stations, and they try to localize it by hiring one person to do weather and traffic. So that's the way of the world now. And so the music follows. There still is great music being created and performed, and you can still see live music on tour, although it's a bit more expensive than it used to be. But in terms of grabbing the music that you like of those stars that are coming on, or the older ones that you've always loved, you still have your resources. You can go to Sirius XM, you can go to pretty much any streaming site will have a radio component that you can customize for yourself. You just put in 5 or 6 seed artists or songs, and then Pandora takes care of the rest of it. And you have your own station but no goddamn advertising, and it's free.
It's
Or
wild.
maybe with advertising, it's free.
Discover the power of Yorma's Choice CBD products. When we chose a sober life, we searched for the best CBD to manage our chronic pain. In Raywood, Kentucky, the home of Bickett and Boone, we found the perfect solution. Yorma's Choice is a range of topicals, tinctures, bath salts, and gummies. Choose Yorma's Choice for pain-free living. Shop now at furpeaceranch.com. FURPEACERANCH.com.
Yeah, well, that's the network that I'm part of, Radio Misfits Network, was started because a lot of the people, were losing their jobs in radio, and so my producer started that because he worked with Steve Dahl for many years, and Steve was on this network until he went back out into the world. But it's really interesting to see how things change, and I think when we're looking at like culture and changing, we see a lot of the same. It's reflected also in cannabis, because now we're seeing larger companies that are carrying products and there's more standardization. And
Sure.
we're also seeing, some celebrity brands as well. Like I had a really great conversation with David Crosby a few months before he passed, and he was working on doing a brand. And little Steven Van Zandt has one. And it's interesting to have the conversations with creatives as well as like how it affects them. Like David, it was definitely part of his life, from like cultivating in Jan's garden to doing his little pieces on when people would put their doobies on, Twitter, and he'd be like, that joint isn't well done. He would do his critiques, whereas like Stevie was talking about how he tried cannabis when he was younger, but he's very sensitive to things. It was a very psychedelic experience. He took from it what he needed to at the moment, and then he decided that he no longer needed to use it, but he understood the importance of the medicinal use portion of it, which is why he started out with a high CBD brand and really looking at it from a wellness perspective. And I'm wondering, like, when you've done interviews with creatives or you've been in their presence, like, have you seen kind of the variety of ways people use it, and from like being kind of, more of a cannabis culture sort of person where there's a lot of consumption to the balance to creativity? Or what are some of the things that you've observed with artists that you've worked with?
Sarah, most people who are involved in an interview with Rolling Stone, let's say, but certainly other magazines over the years, are aware that they're talking to a journalist, so they're not going to walk in or crawl in completely wasted. Especially in more recent years, when there was much more PR control, management control of these celebrities. So they were always on pretty straight, good behavior, except for Sly Stone. Of course. What do you expect from Sly, huh?
Yeah, that would be a trip.
Yeah, and his was he was not cannabis. It was the other C word with him. And speaking of C words, Crosby, of course, I spent an extended amount of time with him. Rolling Stone, when we did our Rolling Stone interviews, as they were called, fashioned after the Playboy interview and the Paris Review interview, would take a long time if the artist was willing. And Crosby was always willing to hang out and talk. So, I saw him in various conditions, but the bottom line was that he was always so articulate. He was so nuanced, so knowledgeable about not only his past, but a lot of other people and the social phenomenon, the changing culture, political scene for sure. And so he went on and on and on. But I never smoked with him. I tended not to partake while on the job. And the most, I think the other one that struck me was Tom Petty. I was visiting him in Malibu somewhere in, I think, the 90s for Parade magazine. And now Parade was a family Sunday magazine that was inserted into various newspapers, whether they wanted them or not. And so that's a major force, because big circulation, the biggest in the country until ARP came along and grew. But Tom Petty greeted me, and we sat and talked, and then he pulled out what he described as an e-cigarette. And that was quite new at that time, so maybe that'll help date the article. And he said it was to help him get away from the tobacco habit. But I don't. Then later on, of course, it was found that e-cigarettes had just as much nicotine as the real cigarettes, and it was, I think, a bridge for him for his major love, which of course was cannabis. And so, again, he was such a guy, such a talent, such a brain, such a musical genius, in control of himself, that Ken never really, as far as I could tell, maybe I was too stoned to know, but it never really impacted the quality of the interview, the conversation. So those are the main ones. But by and large, unless we're taking it back to the days of the Airplane, the Grateful Dead, Big Brother, and the Charlatans, and those early San Francisco bands, I never witnessed a whole lot of smoking going on.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned Airplane, because Jorma Kaukonen now has a CBD brand.
Mm-hmm.
Jorma and Vanessa have been sober for several decades now. And it was really interesting to find out that, they saw everything that was going on. Of course, they have a commitment to being sober, but then they saw the impact that CBD had on their health as far as like topical use. And they turned that into a brand. And I'm hoping we know them very well. So I'm hoping to get them on to be able to talk about that, and just really the fact that there is thoughtful use, there is non-euphoric use, and you can, maintain sobriety and partake in cannabis that's non-euphoric, which I think, we didn't have those conversations, not even a decade ago. It was more about the THC.
Yeah, dating back to my time, I'm probably about 20, 25 years older than you. Takes us back to those days when you scored a lid and did not know what you were scoring. It could be a high, it could be a relaxation thing, or it could be a stimulus. And people just bought it, a lid or a brick or an ounce or a joint at a time, and just lit up, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's it.
What back then, yeah.
And if you got something that didn't work with your body, which is what I would hear a lot from people who, tried before, when you got what you got, they'd be like, I had a bad experience with it. I decided that it must not work well with my body. I didn't do it anymore. And then they would come into the dispensary when I was still working in one, and they'd be like, I'm curious about it, but I don't want to have that experience. Or somebody came in once and said, I had a bad LSD trip. I don't want to have that happen. And I could guarantee that wasn't going to happen. But the way we all respond is like, that's why now it's so nice that you actually know what you're getting, and you're able to track your impressions. And, just seeing that evolution, I really enjoy seeing how it's growing, but I also enjoy seeing how we're looking back and looking at the history. And I know that you can't talk a lot about the project that you're currently working on, but could you give our listeners just like a little like tease as far as like what may be coming on in the future with something you're working on?
You're asking for a taste. You're asking for a little taste, aren't you?
Yep, I sure am.
Well, what can I say about it? I can say it's a film project, and that I have been asked to at least give the treatment a shot, which is basically an expanded summary of a storyline for a motion picture. This is not a documentary. It's a pic. It's not a biopic of a superstar. It deals with cannabis, and to a certain extent, the battle for legalization. But it's a personalized story, and I've finished the treatment, and we're holding off now while the main producers go out and try to show the treatment to various potential financing people and producers and possibly a director or who knows what down the line. But to do this story, I decided to go back in time and see some history of legalization. And it went as far back as Reefer Madness and to Louis Armstrong getting busted in the 30s. And of course, Ray Charles was one of my interview subjects, and he spoke heavily about what he went through with drug laws and busts. And I read up on various mayors and politicians and presidents who commissioned studies about cannabis and how dangerous marijuana was. And in several instances, under the administrations of Nixon and Reagan in particular, the commissions that they appointed involving, I believe, scientists, medical people, politicians, law enforcement people, would do their fact finding and find that, in fact, marijuana, cannabis, was not as dangerous as it had been trumped up to be, and that it ought to be considered as other than as what's the word? I'm thinking category one.
Oh, Schedule 1?
Schedule, that's right, Schedule 1, and it should be downgraded. That it was not, in fact, to be compared to serious heavy opiates like heroin, or later on psychedelic substances like LSD, and that this should be reconsidered. And in both cases, Reagan and Nixon in particular, I don't remember that far back to say Roosevelt, but they just ignored it. They had their political reasons for doing so, and it costs people their lives. It costs people their livelihoods. It costs people their families. It costs families their kids, and it's horrendous. It's criminal. It's said to have been by people who are now beginning to finally turn the tables around somewhat at this very late date. But we're talking about almost 100 years of persecution, wrongful prosecution too, of people who had discovered the substance, and in many cases who did already have medical reasons for smoking it, taking it, despite the illegality of it. It was important enough for them that they partook. And a lot of them, too many, paid the prices. And the price is not just imprisoning somebody for 2 joints and throwing them in prison for years, but the fact that it happens so often that the whole prison system sometimes collapsed and required millions of dollars to build out jails and prisons to incarcerate these people who should not have been even busted in the first place. So it gets you worked up. And so fortunately, my movie is a comedy.
Well, I liked how you did the pivot.
I like to have a balanced life and a balanced motion picture. That's how it is. So that's Sarah. That's all I can kind of tell you. But it really was interesting to go onto YouTube and look at the various histories of cannabis laws in different parts of the country and in Canada and in other parts of the world. And then also, just doing that research was really eye-opening.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at it and you see the reasoning behind, the demonization of cannabis, it was a very political thing. So we're in many ways dealing with political prisoners because it was, racist, and our own William Randolph Hearst found it to be a threat to his lumber industry. And there was just a lot of things that came into that. And, I just remembered the name of the Fred Gardner.
Oh, hey, good name for a weed guy.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? He still has a magazine called O'Shaughnessy's.
Oh.
Yeah.
Were you cheating and looking up Wikipedia while I was talking?
Maybe.
Why? This interview is over.
But I was still listening at the same time. I'm very good with that.
Incredible. So you've already gone through that one thing that happened that where Ehrlichman fessed up to what Nixon was up to in regards to the war on drugs. So you have that quote that infamous quote where they knew that marijuana wasn't as evil as it was said to be, but they were fighting two fronts of enemies that Nixon had: the anti-war left and black people, and it came down to their enforcement of criminalization of drug use, even of marijuana, to basically put down those two camps of people. And the quote is incredible. I'm sure that you have already spoken about this.
Why don't we read it for our listeners who may not know? Okay.
Ehrlichman was talking to a journalist, Dan Baum, and he says, "You want to know what this was really all about? The Nixon campaign in '68 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it." I don't think he talked ghetto like I just did there. You know what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. So there you are.
Yep, that's it. Well, I mean, it was a very pivotal time with, the hippies going against Vietnam and Black Power and so many things. There was a great reckoning, a great equalizer that was coming up, and Nixon did not like that. My uncle was one of his Secret Service agents, stayed up all night and played cards with him, said the dude never slept. Maybe that's why he was so angry and hateful. I don't know.
You could have used a little...
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That would have helped. Who knows? Maybe he did use it.
Looking to grow your cannabis business and expand your network? Join the National Association of Cannabis Businesses for just $50 a month and unlock exclusive access to new commercial opportunities and clients across the industry. Enjoy special discounts, free advertising, and access to members-only content. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, NACB tailors its memberships to propel you forward. Visit nacb.com now and join the leading community dedicated to cannabis business excellence. So as we wrap up, when you look at what's going on, because you've seen the landscape, and I know that in many ways you see things through more of like the creative musical lens, but you also are the politics. What are you hopeful for? What are you excited about?
Well, that was what the bit of momentum that has just now started under the Biden administration rolls on, and that they and others listen to what the public is saying, the changing numbers in the opinion surveys about legalization of marijuana, and that big tobacco stays out of the way. I know that there is fear and loathing in certain industries about what cannabis can do, changing their businesses, and that legalization will be, in fact, recreational as well as medical in all states. And it's not this slow crawl towards where we're at now, 38 states out of however many we have still left. And that's what I'm hoping for. I think that, as you said, there's such a sophistication now in the manufacturing and categorization of different levels of cannabis for different uses, that as long as people are able to go to certified legal dispensaries, or just honest ones, that things should be all right. What am I reading here? I saw something in the New York Times about how it was just a few months ago that in New York City they had 85 legal dispensaries.
Yeah,
it's not too good, but they have 2,000 illegal ones, unlicensed ones. But I'm sure many of the unlicensed ones are probably staffed with experts and honest people, and are not just ripoffs of the clientele. But that has to change. People should be able to access legitimate cannabis in legitimate places at legitimate prices. That would be nice, because obviously the illegality of it keeps the costs up for the consumer. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm for the future.
Enforcement is incredibly expensive. And I was just in New York, and it was amazing, all the different bodegas and shops, and that you could smell it in the air. I mean, Jeff and I have talked about, like, my husband played with Bob and Phil and Further, and so when they would do MSG, they'd always have Empire State Building like lit up, kind of like tie-dye. And he said that one of the things that used to really bum him out was that people would be so excited that they were there, but then you'd hear about people getting busted in line with cannabis on the way in. He's like, it's nice to know that people can enjoy themselves and not worry about that now. Like, they're having, I just had Steve Bloom on recently, and he was talking about how it's wonderful to have events now that aren't necessarily protest events, but they're celebrations.
But it is still a federal crime, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah, there you are.
So we got a lot of work to do.
More changes, hopefully, on the way.
That's it. Thank you so much for taking time to spend with me. I know that you're busy. Like, you still have a lot of stuff going on, and I'm really excited to hear more about the project when it gets going. And everybody, keep a close watch, because it's going to be good.
Yeah, if and when it happens, I will be happy to let you know about it, and maybe even horn into your podcast again.
I would love that. And for people who would like to see what you're doing and follow you on social media, how do they do that?
Oh, good luck. I have I'm not good at it, and so I can't call myself lazy. I'm busy, but I rarely go on my Instagram account, which is @Fong-Torres, and I have a Facebook page, and I occasionally will update it. But the documentary you mentioned early on, I am very proud of what Suzanne Jokai and her team did. It's called Like a Rolling Stone, The Life and Times of Ben Fong-Torres on Netflix. It'll be on there for, I think, one more year. It's been on for 2 years already. And so it's done well, but that's a good one. And then there is also San Francisco Sounds, a place in history, or place in time, and it's on MGM Plus under the dreaded Amazon Prime umbrella, but it's a two-parter, 2.5 hours total, and it really gives you a full look back at what happened here in San Francisco from the early to mid 60s into the early 70s, not just musically, but politically and artistically and in every other respect. And I think that people would have a good time looking at that. And it's not flashbacking to the usual scenes of Ashbury or the ballrooms or the Be-In or all of that, but it's a nice, thorough reexamination and an entertaining one too. San Francisco Sounds.
I love that.
And that reminds me that the anthem of the whole thing here in San Francisco back then was Get Together. Let's get together, as done by the Airplane and We Five and the Youngbloods. And it was composed by a young man, Dino Valente, who wrote it and then had to sell it for almost nothing because he got busted for pot and had to find cash immediately to bail himself out. And so in exchange for freedom, with which he then later on joined Quicksilver Messenger Service, he lost out on millions of dollars of royalties.
Wow.
For one of the saddest musical stories to come from the guy who generated what became the anthem of the times. There you are. Legalize it.
Legalize it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to our future conversations, especially when that project comes through, because I know it will.
Yeah. Project. All right, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please Give us a review, share it with a friend, let us know what your favorite episodes are, and if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sarah Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sarah on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsarah.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher. Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.